them on silent mode. We will be starting the post-T session with a keynote address. This will be an environmental scan by Lt.Gen Sunil Srivastava, Director CENJOWS. Lieutenant General Srivastava is all set for his keynote address. I'll request you all to please kindly be seated as quickly as possible.
लैंड, सी और स्काई तक भी अपने डिफेंस की कल्पना है। अब ये दायरा स्पेस यानी अंतरिक्ष की तरफ बढ़ रहा है। सिर्फ लैंड, सी और स्काई तक भी अपने डिफेंस की कल्पना है। अब ये दायरा स्पेस यानी अंतरिक्ष की तरफ बढ़ रहा है।
Very good morning and a warm welcome to you all. Welcome to the post-tea session. As we had shared with you before going for the tea break, this would be a keynote address. This is an environmental scan by Lt.Gen Sunil Srivastava, Director CENJOWS. I request you all once again to please quickly take your seats. And with that, please join me in welcoming him on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have gathered here today with the collective dream of making India strong, reliant, and confident in the space of research which will put us in a pivotal position in the world of space. A very warm welcome to Lt.Gen Sunil Srivastava, Director CENJOWS. May I now request him to kindly take over the podium and share with us his environmental scan.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you once again for being with us here today. And let me state very humbly, outright, that my knowledge and exposure to space though it goes back about 10 years when I was a brigadier in the Indian Army and nominated to then newly created a vertical which was to be interacting with the other two services on matters related to space. So the journey that started then remained that of an academic inquiry into what space is, and then also as a warfighter, what space can do. And now presently in my present appointment, I'm dealing with any and everything tri-service. So space happens to be a part of my charter there. What am I going to be talking about? An environmental scan traditionally and classically is about a SWOT kind of an analysis wherein you talk about threats, opportunities, and so forth. No, I have not structured my presentation in that manner. Space inherently and very critically deals with three salient issues. That is the national security, commerce, and growth. The economies of countries today are inextricably intertwined with anything and everything in space, and so is the security. And we couldn't have asked for any better proof of this than what is happening in Ukraine, wherein we all have spoken about it many times, what Starlink has done for them. And what, in response, Russia has said is that anything which is quasi-military will be targetable. And then in response, what NATO has said is that Article 5 application now gets enlarged to assets in space. So that is where we are, a frontier which was one for growth and prosperity, and it was always a critical, an inspirational arena for exploration and inquiry, has now today become congested as well as contested. So I'm going to be talking about that. All right, to begin with, now this is an approximation of what the space economy looks like. The pie chart on the left tells you $464 billion worth, of which the commercial component is about $362 billion. The defense and the government each $31 billion. On its right, then it sub-allocates as to how it's broken down. Services are the largest. What Mr. Somnath was mentioning, applications, $364 billion. Manufacturing and launch, $29 billion, $10 billion. So all the glamour is there, optics is there, but the money is not there. By application, satellite navigation, satellite communications have a larger pie. Client type, obviously, commercial clients are the maximum. And over a period of time, say 2009 onwards, the bar graph on the right tells you that from $216 billion, it's now grown to $464 billion and more. And at the bottom, I've given some approximations as put out by the Press Information Bureau in a brochure about India's defense vision this month itself. So it says United States has got a 40% component, India a 2% component. 2021 figures have been given, but more importantly, it's anticipated by 2025, Indian part of the pie could be $50 billion. Okay, and that by 2030, 9%, 10% of it. So what is that 2030 and beyond kind of projection? Let's look at that. With more and more nations now diving into this race in space, and 90% and more of it being driven commercially with CAGRs of 6 and 7% and more. There are approximations by various agencies, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, and so forth. But what you would notice is that these assessments are all too divided, and the bandwidth is very, very big. So some maintain that by 2030 it will be a trillion plus economy. By 2040, most agree that it would be a trillion plus economy, and some have gone on to assess that by 2050 it will be 3-4 trillion and more. 3 trillion, 2.7 to 3 trillions. And what is the driver? Governments definitely are not. The United States today is about $61 billion. India, the last part of the bar graph, is about $2 billion. That 13,500 crore plus kind of an allotment to Department of Space. And then we have all these reasons, good reasons, that are driving the space commerce, communication, media, broadband, television, transportation, climate change and disaster, Millennium Development Goals, each one of them is mapped to space. We have mining and agriculture, finance and insurance, all your ATM deliveries every time, the timestamp, everything comes from there. Important part of self-defense and deterrence, and minimally intrusive verification. All right, so in the present circumstances, people speculate whether this kind of growth will be sustained, the CAGRs will kind of happen. What I have to say is that all the analysis says that from now to 2050, the global growth could be just 1.5 to 2% year-on-year GDP, but then it will definitely, at the end of, by 2050, get on to be almost close to 400 trillion economy, and the champions who will be in the race will remain China and United States. By real terms, nominal terms, whichever way you look at it, China is already there with the US and more. But there is, on the right side, the graph slightly faint, I hope you can see it. That's by the Lowy Institute. And they have factored a likely growth slowdown in China because of its dwindling demographic dividend, limits of capital intensive growth, deceleration of productivity growth, which are all true. And particularly now the state policies are the reason why some of that is happening. And it says with very convincingly that the annual growth could slow down to 3% by 2030, and by 2040, 2%, and averaging just about 2 to 3% out to 2050. So what it comes to is that this contestation between United States and China is a slugfest that's going to play out for a fairly long period of time. What does that do? Now, this is the kind of polarization. In the center are the countries like India and Brazil and many more, which are like always non-aligned, hedging their bets. And it's the endeavor of the two poles on the left and the right side to pull them over. I have not put the friends of China here. There are very few counted, so we all are aware. And what is it that it results in? So diffusion of power, technology, networks, and information power will be like more substantial than perhaps the traditional dime. Resource and geoeconomic confrontation, we are seeing it, chip wars and so forth. Fragmented supply chains, COVID set it off, and now we are seeing it continuing. Competing worldviews, and each side wanting to re-script the rules of the game as suited to its own ideology and interests. Deterrence, obviously, is something like appears to be failing. Interstate conflicts are going to increase. Fragile states will keep having civil wars, no change to that. And finally, we have been seeing gray zone conflicts, hybrid wars, and that is where space provides a medium, a domain wherein this finds a very good expression. Right. So this is what we are concerned about. In this contestation, there will be contestation about the order and the norms. We already are seeing that there are varied interpretations of the laws of armed conflict. We are seeing that maximum contestations are already manifested: non-proliferation, arms control, space traffic, and there's absolutely no consensus on very, very critical areas: Arctic region, cyberspace, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and weaponization of space. So this is what is the thing that we are concerned with today. Finally, what it comes to is that the critical supply chains, and in that, the last one, rare earths, etc. That is where India only finds its presence in this analysis as a midstream or a refining player, and that too in the solar and the rare earths. So that is where actually there are going to be contestations, and this is the reason why there is a race to find such and other minerals out there in space, mine them there, all right, and talk about getting them there or using them there. We already had some kind of fiber optics being made much superior in space as compared to what we do here on Earth. So all this has led to a huge spurt in launches in space. You see a graph, 1957 onwards, less than 200, and then suddenly a spurt. Much of that spurt is led by low Earth orbit, the interest in low Earth orbit. You know, there is some kind of an analysis, I'm forgetting the name of the person who wrote it about 20 years back, I think Dalton or some name like that. What it says is that whoever controls the low Earth orbit in that much geopolitical manner will control the near space, and whoever controls the near space will eventually control the terra. All right. So that's where we are. This only graph is only up to 2021. LEOs in 2022 have been far more. The graph of 2022 for orbital launches, very interesting to see that China has almost always equaled, that is the purple bar compared with the blue bar, historically through 2015, except that in this year, the United States has had more launches. India has a modest presence in the whole pie, about 50 plus satellites, hybrid included in the geo part. So this drive is now, why is it accelerating? Major reason is cost. I think both the speakers, Chairman ISRO and Dr. Reddy spoke about it. So you have the Space Shuttle 1980 costing $65K dollars per kg. And then you have now less than $1,000 per kg as far as heavy launches to LEO are concerned. And then you have the geo communication satellites cost per gigabit in $1 million. VSAT version 1 in 2011-12 was $3.5 million. And the blue dots anticipate, this is anticipatory as to what it's going to be in the region of 0.5 and less. You can see that the high resolution Earth observation imagery average cost 2 decades back was $20 per kilometer square, and now it's $15 and reducing. And for SAR, $133 per square kilometers, and now almost half and reducing. So I've summed up the reasons: the interest in Internet of Things, GPS-enabled devices, on-the-move connectivity, high bandwidth, broadband communication, cost-effective launches, reusable ride sharing, etc., and advanced analytical and edge processing, mega constellations, more ground stations. All speakers have already alluded to these. So 2 decades back, 5 to 10 gigabits per second, and now we are talking about 1 terabit. This is the, wherever I'm mentioning these things, it is to give you a baseline, a frame of reference, a level of ambition, so to say, as to where the world is heading and where we should be pitching our crosshairs. So it's more focused on Ka, KU and V bands. Usage, use cases, exploration, science, military, aerospace and defense is there, but it's not so important as now change detection. Private players are launching these. Emissions, space for space, not so much space for Earth. Space for Earth remains very critical for defense. What it means for the industry, as has been said by, I think, Dr. Somnath in the morning, what we are seeing is persistent interest in manufacturing, more visible stuff. So miniaturized satellites, advanced space manufacturing, 24-22%. And what we find on the right bottom of that graphics is space data, space mining, space missions. They also take up some amount, and it's growing. But very interestingly, what are the facts for India? That is what I want to share with you. It's known to many of us present here, but at the cost of even repetition. First startup 2012, and now more than 100 active. I'm sure I would be far away from the mark, perhaps there could be even more. Indian space policy opened it out for private sector 2020, and now officially told 2023. Main accelerator, Agnikul, Skyroot, in rockets, Dhruva and Pixel in satellites, Bellatrix, engine thrusters, Digantra and mapping, and Pixel has got a contract from NRO, and I'm sure there would be many more getting from agencies abroad. And in 2022, they were able to garner about $100 million for the invested in startups. You see on the right side that India has more companies, private players present than China. India stands at 3.4%, fifth overall, and then China is 2.7%. And the bottommost map, startup hotspot, the heat map, it depicts India, Europe, and US. So that's the promise for you. These are some approximations done by Ernst & Young, October 22. A paper where they say that about 2025 we would be about $12–13 billion kind of economy in space. And the most important part, the bottom two graphs, India satellite service market by type, that is for service market, which is satellite services, it's about $4+ billion by 2025, and the consumer, the green part says it's the highest, but if you look at the right bottom graph, it tells you how much for everyone, and in that, defense is about just short of $1 billion. So 4+ billion and defense about less than $1 billion. So it's about 25% of the pie. But is this the global trend? Definitely not. The global trend for military is lesser. Those reasons are there. And what's driving it? I've already mentioned the Department of Space budget, the policy, creation of in-space, ISPA, 75 defense space challenges. I think very, very enthusiastic response to that from the startups. Transfer of technology by ISRO, hand-holding, testing facilities, Defense Space Agency and the DRDO organization, and the plans for defense satellites. All of this put together is driving this engine. So now the global perspective. The global perspective is that the commercial usage is about 74% and more, and the military commercial or military by itself is about 10%. Government commercial is about another 10%. That's largely the composition. And within, as far as application areas are concerned, communication takes the cake with 64%, and Earth observation is a little more than 20%. Let's talk a bit more about this Earth observation. Before that, we will have a look at what is the composition as far as the government and commercial are concerned. The government pie, civil government is about 40%, the commercial is about 40%, civil government is another about 40%, and less than 20% globally is what military has. And these are the summary of 186 launches, including the 6 failed, the statistics of that. So in that you see clearly the interest in LEO is the highest. Overall, about 570 plus satellites globally have military or dual use, about 50% in LEO. All right, so let's see the usage now. I would like you to focus on what China does. China is more focused on security, imaging, signal intelligence, technology, as compared to the rest of the world. Once again, why this interest? Let's look at that. So, imaging and imagery is the surest way of getting warned about what you should be concerned and taking actions to deter your adversary. Looking at all of these things, weather mapping, digital terrain, disaster management, change detection, also defense and deterrence. And I've tabulated below with help from, I think, Brigadier Anshuman, if he is present here, the statistics at the bottom tells you that as far as China is concerned, the ability to revisit, put together nationally, the PLA, state-owned industries, commercial and cumulative. Electro-optical is less than 12 minutes. Video is less than 6 hours. SAR about 6 hours. And hyperspectral imagery about 24 hours. Like, even if these approximations are somewhat true, that tells us a lot about how we should be operating on the ground. If that is the ability to see you in a near consistent manner, particularly in the hotspot areas, so we should be developing our TTPs accordingly. How does China do all of that? Now, most of you would have gone through this, so I'll just mention the major highlights. They keep revising these goals into 3 steps. So the revision now says that by 2027, they want to be close to about 4,000 satellites, LEO, heavy launchers, 150-ton capability, Long March 9, on-orbital services and maintenance, OSAM, that is what is the focus, and you're seeing it happen. Robotic arms, taking that satellite to the graveyard orbit, etc. All of that is expression of that. Automated debris removal, shooting at meteors and so forth. That's they're planning to do. They've already identified the meteor or the asteroid. Then lunar-based Earth observation. Next generation national space infrastructure with global coverage. All right. By 2035, about 10,000 satellites presence in LEO, additional. Ground-based optical tracking facilities more in the western area. Then low-cost hybrid propulsion. They've already used kerosene-derived and methane-based kind of a propulsion, and they're working on those in 8 years, 9 different kind of engines. So that is where they're going to reduce the cost of operation and use resources which are available. Jiren satellite, they've revised the target from 138 now to 300 satellites, and earlier it was 10 minutes revisit by 2030, possibly now they want to do it by 2025. By 2049, all their ambitions are mostly in the interplanetary and beyond in the solar system. We'll not discuss much about it, but that's where they've set their crosshairs. And the Chinese civil space infrastructure, they keep driving it 5-year plan-wise. What I want to flag for you is that what they do is they prepare brick by brick. And I think data sharing policies to come on a common platform, civil and military, was a huge step. And this is where you require interoperability and integration. And then 3 major systems, which is everybody does: remote sensing, SATCOM, and broadcasting and PNT. And the complete development of national civil space infrastructure. Focus more on overseas stations. They have presence in South America, they have presence in West Asia, and these are areas which are giving them presence in Southern Hemisphere, which mostly even the advanced countries like United States lack. And they have, in I think Chongqing, about 30 or more radars, 30-meter kind of dishes, focusing mostly on the space situational awareness. So looking thousands of years beyond into the galaxy. So that is what their levels of ambitions are. Second generation data relay, we are also working on it. And then next generation BeiDou. We already have BeiDou 3.0, 3.4 is supposed to get fielded by 2035, and that is also going to provide these services in the deep space as also under the sea, globally, wherever you are. So that the next generation BeiDou, and very low Earth orbits. I think Dr. Reddy spoke about it, between 180 to 200 kilometers. That is what they are looking at. So at the end of the day, what are they looking at? High speed, secure communications. Quantum is a part of it. We're not discussing, we have discussed it enough yesterday. Satellite internet, then tactical data relay satellites, advanced PNT. They've already taken an atomic clock up there in the space station, which has just gone up. So very heavy launchers, low cost, reusable. And if they have to meet their targets, they have to launch something like 600 to 1,000 satellites every year as we go. So this is something which is a huge ask as of now. All right, so when countries do all of that, obviously everything has a counter. We have spoken about these in the situations yesterday. I'm just graphically illustrating it here, taken from some of the analysis. So you have space situational awareness that gives you the ability to either go for a reversible damage or you go for a irreversible damage. It all depends upon how gray or how overt you want to remain. You have to have multiple response options for whatever situations come. So electronic warfare, directed energy weapons, laser dazzling, and so forth are the way. And you can do it from space. You have radio frequency jammers, kinetical vehicles, satellite ramming, and then you have lasers, robotic mechanisms. We already have that demonstrated, I mentioned. Chemical sprays, high power microwaves. High power microwaves are particularly suited but risky for the space domain. And as far as electronic warfare is concerned, you can jam the uplink or the downlink. Now, this is an assessment of where the very recent assessment of last year as to how countries are rated on these capabilities. The agency does it every year. So the red triangles are the ones that tell you where the capability is like significant. The yellow rectangles are telling you where it is a little bit, and none is green dots. So whereas as far as India is concerned, we are mostly at the R&D testing stage, and you look at the United States, I think I have some quarrel with their ability to do LEO co-orbital. They don't have it stated as a policy, but they have the capability. So a question mark there, I would differ. And directed energy, as far as China is concerned, well, putting it a question mark there or having nil capability, I would again put a question mark. ASATs are nothing new. They have been going on since I would say 59. So earlier the mainly two players, US and Russia, and now 2005-7 onwards, China jumped into the fray, and India also had a successful one in March 19, and 1 year before that was not successful. Russia has resumed in a big manner. US has said in April last year that self-imposed moratorium on ASATs. Okay, I must mention this, that I don't know how true is this, but literature says that the Russian satellite backed away from a US satellite and they used something as a target and they fired on it. Maybe people delving into space and dealing with on a day-to-day basis will be able to comment. And the deputy of the space agency has said that US space systems, they face reversible attacks every single day. Since Crimea happened, and more recently, I've only given you the most recent actions. Russia has been accused of many actions. They go from jamming to co-orbital, Luch or Luch, whichever way you pronounce that satellite, has been operating for the last 2 years and moving around, I think, electronic warfare, sensing things. Direct descent ASAT, November 21, matter of great concern, a global warning, I guess, from their side. And they've done a cyber attack on VSAT, we are all aware. Aircrafts of Finnair jammed, Starlink suffered, we are aware. But nobody is a saint. While China does RPOs with their own satellites, United States, USA 270 came close to Xi'an 12, and 2 of them. So the answer lies in deterrence and through space situational awareness, defense and offensive countermeasures. All right, the world over we are seeing that space is now being, for good reasons, being treated as a critical infrastructure. And the moment you say something as critical, so you have now government oversight, you have funding, you have protection, and you start using whole of nation approaches. Space always was. And then when you say something is a war fighting domain, and NATO, US, UK, France, China, everyone calls it a war fighting domain. So, and along with fusion of cyber and EW, I think Dr. Somnath was worried that something of that fusion is lacking on our side. And then military space strategies and doctrines obviously crop up. They have been issued by various countries I think it's all available in literature. So when you say that I want space superiority, when you say that I want to operate with impunity, when you say I want to deny it to somebody else, obviously you are talking about weaponization. There's nothing concealed about it. Concepts, before I talk about the left of launch and proactive active defense in space, so all the nuclear C2 or C3, strategic C2, C3 for everyone is space-based. So inadvertently, if somebody does something over there, it could easily lead to miscalculations, and particularly strategies like left of launch and proactive. Civil military fusion or separation, everything is fusion. If anybody wants to make a pretense that we have separated, like to claim that NASA is entirely civil, put a question mark. Various types of military space units, various countries are using, various actions have been listed there. Most important is space service support, C4ISR, data, curation, etc. is a very important part. Mostly we focus only on the visible, optical one, launch, satellites, and so forth. But data and C4ISR is the most critical part. All right, so where is the threat? Debris, we are all aware, from like 1 millimeter to 1 centimeter, and even things not recorded running into like thousands. And we just saw the International Space Station having a problem in December, and the I think return of 3 or 4 taikonauts of Russia. Amazingly, the Americans call them astronaut. The Americans call them astronauts, Russians cosmonauts, and the Chinese taikonauts, right? So they can't even agree on a similar terminology there, let alone coming to terms with all these space rules. India itself, the graph shows, has been maneuvering its satellites, and increasingly so. Now I talk about something which is becoming more salient. Geopolitics and now astropolitics. Geopolitics is like every place. Geography has an importance. What you occupy is important. We spoke about it yesterday. In space, it is even more important. Who gets into those Lagrange points of moon L1, L2, etc.? Who goes to the southern part of the moon? Who gets there first? Who establishes this kind of a huge, artist impression of what the Chinese and the Russians want to do together, with a solar panel laid out over there and a colony and more on the moon, and a parallel thing going on, Artemis, with 23 countries and more signed over there. Artemis and its agreement deals entirely with celestial planetary bodies. It's got nothing to do with and they say we are compliant with the Outer Space Treaty. And there are quarrels with that. We heard Dr. Kaul and others mention through discussions. These issues are becoming salient. $26 billion globally have been spent on entirely various things related to only interplanetary planetary exploration and research. So the exemplary, much cliched cooperation, collaboration between US and Russia has fractured. Even through the worst of times, they have been there in the International Space Station. Its life has been extended to 2030, but the cooperation is now diminishing. Anarchy and mismanagement is there. Commercial drivers, there was a discussion yesterday as to how much they are in control of states, though they are supposed to be under them. Question mark, there is ambiguity. Race to occupy higher ground, being the first mover. It's making space unsustainable. We may deny it to our future generations. So what should we do? This and more. Come to terms with removable debris from orbit, research development, be together, talk to each other. It's a huge ask, all of that. This is just a dream to finally have a thriving space economy, sustain and manage, sense and communicate, protect and secure, discover and build, survive and thrive. This is what we should be doing. And let me now finally close with sharing with you is what Dr. Abdul Kalam, when he went for the dedication of INSAT 4B, 2007, he laid out a global vision 2050 for space. And he spoke of a comprehensive space security, international space force. He spoke of a global space council. That man was a visionary. Actionable agenda, We have heard much of it. It's a huge tabulation, I think everything summed up here in various verticals. What should we be doing? And I've not even spoken of many other things. I've not spoken of hyperspectral. I've not spoken of many things with paucity of time. But even if we start making a checklist and start doing things, we'll need to have a roadmap. I think Dr. Somnath said the lag 10, 15 years and more. So 2049 is a good time. I think we should be looking at putting our crosshairs. But there are some, we have to prioritize some things we want today. In what scale that matters. Thank you so much for a patient hearing. I don't know. It's okay? Thank you.